All right. To come and speak to us. So we managed to find recent pharmacology graduates, and that was something that was very important to us because we wanted people that we could relate to as Gen Z. Because as much as we appreciate having people who've been in the field for 30 years, it's sometimes nice to speak to people that are sort of like more earlier on in their career, more relatable to us. So yeah, on the screen, hopefully you guys can see, but we've got Sarah, we've got Dr. Emily, we've got Qasim, and we've got Danielle as well. And they're recent pharmacology graduates, as I've said. And they work in a range of different industries to give us insight into sort of like what they did once they graduated, and sort of how they managed to end up in the roles that they've ended up in. So firstly, we're going to start off with Sarah, and she is a trainee trademark lawyer, attorney, sorry, at Lowry. So she's just gonna kick us off with just sort of like telling us how she got into the industry that she's in and sort of like what she did after she graduated. So let me see if I can figure out how to stop sharing. I always say I'm a scientist, not a computer scientist. Oh, okay, cool. There we go. All right, so
Okay, I'll just share my screen. Can you see this okay? Is that okay?
yeah, I can see, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'll just get started. So good evening, everyone, and it is a pleasure to be here with you today. So thank you so much, Maria and Dexter, for reaching out to me. It's great to take part in this, and I'm happy to be a part of the network you're building. So I hope everyone finds this somewhat interesting and potentially even helpful if you're considering a career in IP. And I'd be happy to take any questions at the end or follow up on LinkedIn if you want to contact me. So, first of all, my name is Sarah Bonar and I'm a trainee trademark attorney. I currently work in a team of patent and trademark attorneys at a Glasgow based IP firm called Laurie. And I'm halfway through my first university course, which is where I'm training to become a chartered trademark attorney. I studied pharmacology for my undergrad and precision medicine for my master's at Glasgow. And I was always interested in a career as a patent attorney originally because I liked the idea of being at the forefront of discoveries, drug discoveries, working with inventors and big companies. However, I always knew that I wasn't really interested in working in a lab or doing a research based job. And I decided I'd rather be on the other side of things and opted to enter the corporate world instead. So I'm aware that this is quite a niche job. So I think I should probably start off with talking a wee bit about what IP actually is and why it's so important to any industry or business in the world. Um, and that's where how we come into it and how you could potentially get involved as well. So if anybody watches Dragon's Den, you'll notice that one of the first questions they ask is to do with IP. They essentially want to know if a business has any patents, trademarks, registered designs for their new products and inventions. And I'll go over this a wee bit in detail soon, but to put it simply, IP is basically an umbrella term which covers patents, trademarks, designs, copyright, and patents protect inventions, trademarks protect branding, and designs protect the appearance of a product. And the reason that people on Dragon's Den, for example, would be so interested in this is because IP plays a crucial role in the value and the security of a business. In fact, I think a recent report actually said that over 70% of a business's value often lies in its intangible assets, and that does include IP. So IP offers individuals and companies a unique market position. It protects their ideas from being copied or used without permission for a set period of time. And it gives them a competitive advantage that differentiates their products or services from those of competitors. However, they're also really attracted to investors because it represents assets that they can generate revenue from. Like, for example, a patent can be licensed to other companies for a set fee, or it can also be used in partnerships for deals or sales. And generally, because of these reasons, that's why it would increase the value of a business. So, as I would assume most of you are life science students, so you'll probably be aware that in this industry in particular, innovations can range from novel drugs to new chemical entities to medical devices, and it's all probably therefore not surprised that a lot of pharmaceutical companies' revenue comes from their patents, especially in the earlier days. But trademarks are also as equally as important, but they are different because they actually safeguard the brands as opposed to the inventions, and they allow their customers to get recognition and then encourage purchasing from specific brands. So put together, well-protected IP is extremely important to securing commercial success in competitive environments, and the job of patent and trademark attorneys is also very, very important. I will briefly talk about the trademark attorney route just because that is what I deal with. Can you guys see that? Okay. Does it change slides? Yeah. Okay. So at its core, a trademark is a sign that is like a name or a logo that distinguishes the goods and services of one company from another. It essentially acts as a brand identifier. So, for example, when you see the Pfizer name or the logo for AstraZeneca, you would immediately associate it with a particular source, a reputation, or a level of quality of a product. And this kind of branding is especially important in the life sciences sector, as companies can heavily rely on this to build trusted customers or when they're launching new pharmaceutical products. And this is basically where trademark attorneys come in, because we make sure customers aren't misled into thinking that product comes from the wrong company. So I basically spend my days meeting clients, managing large portfolios, discussing new products, new launches, checking if competing marks exist, and then taking legal action against anyone who is using similar marks to my clients. So this could mean filing objections, defending against challenges, or trying to negate infringement disputes. So basically everything we do is sort of in the background to make sure these companies can run as smoothly as possible. On this slide, you'll see a wee example there of the polo marks. So they're all used by 3 completely different brands, but they can all coexist. One of them's for clothes, one for mints, and one for cars. And the reason that they can coexist is because they operate in distinct markets, but also because they've got a good team of trademark attorneys behind the scenes who have carved out protection for each one of them in a specific area. And then on the left-hand side of the screen, I've just included a wee link to the job prospects website, because you can go on there and have a look and see what we actually do day in, day out. And I've obviously just given a wee brief summary, so I can probably share these slides with Dexter and then hopefully you can have a look at them. And very quickly, if you Google the role of a trademark attorney, it will probably tell you that you need a law degree or a business-related qualification. But I'm living proof that's not the case, because as I mentioned, my background is actually in science, and I joined Laurie with the intention of becoming a patent attorney. And the reason I did this is because I knew that getting a traineeship was really hard. Like, I knew how competitive it was. So it also takes a really long time to qualify. So my plan was to get my foot in the door, go in at an entry-level role, and then suss out if I really wanted to do it before committing to all these exams. However, I quickly realised that I actually love the trademark side of things. So that's something I never thought I'd be qualified for, and I wouldn't have considered it if I wasn't already part of the firm. So I'm lucky that a traineeship came up and then I managed to get the traineeship. So that's how I got here. But to become chartered, I now need to do 2 separate qualifications on top of my original degrees. So I'm currently at Bournemouth, and then after that, if I pass this exam, I'll need to go to Nottingham Uni, which is what I'll do next year, hopefully. And these exams are really, really tough. And the reason that they're extra tough is because a lot of the students, well, mostly all the students, don't have law backgrounds. So you really are starting from scratch, and it's not easy at all. And also you need to do it while you're working full time, but it is hopefully worth it in the end, because it is a really interesting job. And then you need to do 2 years working to be qualified, but that does include your time as a trainee. These are just a few of the brands that we work with on a daily basis. So, for example, you might recognise some of them, but for example, clients like Imaginab, they are a company that develop cancer diagnostic tools. So in cases like this, the patent team will work and they'll try to protect the inventions, whereas we'll handle the branding side of everything. And this kind of work in particular really benefits from my scientific background, because it allows me to fully understand what the client does, which in turn will then help me draft specifications and build stronger arguments, especially when working with this type of client. But obviously, as you can probably tell here, no 2 days are the same, because we've got all sorts of brands here. But that's part of the fun. Quickly on to patent attorneys. This is maybe of interest to students here. Patents are a form of IP, and they give the inventor an exclusive right to that invention for a set period of time, which means others can't make use or sell the inventions during that time without permission. But to be granted a patent has to be new, inventive, and capable of industrial application. So, for instance, if a company develops a new method of synthesizing a drug, they might be able to patent that process, which then means competitors can be stopped, prevented from doing it too, and then the company can then make money from it, obviously. What did they do? So, like trademark attorneys, patent attorneys also spend a lot of time meeting with inventors, research teams, large companies to learn about latest innovations. Their job is then to assess whether these inventions qualify for patent protection, because obviously not everything that you invent is actually new. There's a big long process that has to be completed first, but this obviously can be a really rewarding job or also really challenging, because one of the more difficult parts of the job will be there's people who are maybe their life work is depending on this, and then you have to be the person to tell them, well, actually this isn't gonna go through. But that obviously this means the job does require good communication skills as well as a really good technical understanding, because you have to analyze a lot of scientific documents to assess the patent's novelty, write these patent drafts, and then handle the filing of the patents in the UK, Europe, internationally. And then also there's a bit of arguing as well, because you have to defend your client's rights. You have to challenge third parties who are infringing your client's rights, and then also just manage the portfolios. On this slide, I've included two images there, just of two quite famous patents, I would assume. So that's the Lego patent, and then the one below it is Michael Jackson's boots that he wore on stage, the defying gravity thing. He actually got them patented. But there's patents for everything. If you were to go on, you can see the original patent for aspirin or CRISPR technology, all that's online. Again, I've just included a little link there so you can go on and see what patent attorneys do day in, day out. The route to become a patent attorney is longer than a trademark attorney. Again, it says you need a minimum of a 2-1 degree, specifically in a science, engineering, tech, maths-based subject. Specifically, not a law degree. And again, you don't need a PhD, but a lot of attorneys do have PhDs or masters. But I personally think that's because a lot of people haven't heard about this job. It's not really something that's spoke about enough, or not spoke about a lot actually. But people tend to hear about it when maybe they are doing a PhD, because maybe they are coming into contact with attorneys themselves because they're working on something that's novel. So then therefore they end up going down that route. But if you're just doing an undergrad pharmacology degree, it's not something that really comes up. But again, it's really difficult to get traineeships for trademark and patent jobs. And that's probably just to do with the confidential nature of the job, because we are really working with sensitive information, things that haven't been released publicly yet. So you will struggle to get a traineeship, sorry, an internship. But so if you apply and you get rejected, don't worry about it. Most people do. I did, so it's fine. But then when you're in the job and you actually get your traineeship, there are a minimum, I think, of 14 exams to become fully qualified, that is. But you have your 5 UK foundations, and then I think it's 4 to become chartered in the UK. And then for the EU, so you can actually practice in the EU as well. And I think there's another 5 exams there. This has just changed this year, though. So some people in my firm are doing the old exams and some people are doing the new ones. But there is about another 5 exams, and people do tend to fail. And this is very, very normal, and it's also expected. I think one of the partners in my firm yesterday was actually talking to me about his exams, and he said one of the papers he sat, there was a 26% pass rate. So lots of people failed, obviously, and he failed, but this is expected, and it's okay, because your employers actually pay for your exams and will pay for your resits as well. So you're allowed to take them a few times. So don't be disheartened by that. Challenges then, it is a very difficult process. The exams are difficult and it can take a long time to qualify, and it is a lot to wrap your head around. especially because you're coming from a STEM background. To learn law is very difficult because it's completely different to anything we were taught, because we spend a lot of time in undergrad doing law, lab reports and things, and then you're basically then having to then understand law and then learn how to answer questions on law, and it's so difficult. But once you grasp it, it's okay. You also have no idea what client's going to walk through the door, so you have to be prepared to constantly learn. And a lot of people really like this, especially people who are, really into a certain area of technology or a certain area of pharmacology. This is like really exciting to them. So you can dive into new areas of technology all the time. And both jobs are very deadline driven because your hours are billable. So that means it's very intense and you can't skive. But it does have a lot of rewards as well because it's a really niche profession. And that's actually a good thing because it's so specialized, there is a consistent demand for our skills. So to put it into perspective, I provided some numbers there. Again, that's probably just a rough estimate, but um, if you look at the number of qualified attorneys in comparison to the population of the UK, it's a tiny fraction. It's like 0.000% or something. So you're part of a really small but highly specialized group of individuals, which is quite good, a bit different. And that obviously moves on to this, which is something students always want to know about, I suppose. So we typically, I work in a specialist law firm, but you can also then work in-house as well. So companies like GSK or Diageo or something, they'll have in-house attorneys, and that's primarily what they'll work on, like GSK's patents, whereas I'll work on lots of different clients. Um, I suppose a perk of the job is that you're compensated for the studying that you do. So, like when you pass an exam, your salary will then usually jump. Pass another exam, salary jumps again. So it's not a case of you have to pass everything and then you become qualified and then you start earning a good wage. It does increase every few years, which is good. So it's like having a nice wee incentive to study. And then just, I think this is my last slide here, but I've just provided some links that could be useful. So the top one is IP careers, and basically on there, you just have make a wee account, and then you can see all of these different job adverts that will go up, and that can be for trademark attorneys or it can be for patent attorneys. And I think they're all UK based, but it gives you an idea of all the different types of firms that's out there, and it'll tell you the deadline date, and it'll tell you exactly what field they're looking for, because they might be hiring for an electronics patent attorney, or they might be hiring for a life sciences general patent attorney. But that's your place to go. Basically, I'd recommend looking on there because it also gives you tips for applying, and gives you blurbs about the companies and stuff as well. I've also provided links here to SIPMA and SIPA, so that is the organisations that we are regulated by. So that's where we'll differ from solicitors. So we aren't like the lawyers as you'll know them to be. We are regulated by a different body, and it's SIPA and SIPMA there. So you can go on there and have a wee look. And then I also just included a link to my firm's website there in case you wanted to see what we do up to. And then also there's just my LinkedIn link at the bottom as well, because as I said, I'm more than happy to connect to everyone, because I do think it's really, really important that things like this happen, because having your network is so important. Because that's actually how I got my job. I got it via LinkedIn. So I would recommend that everyone follows companies you're interested in, try and connect with the directors of these companies and just have a look, and always make sure you're keeping an eye on when they're hiring. Most firms, I think we do start hiring people in like September time, usually in line with graduations. But as I said, they are very, very competitive. So just make sure you've got your CVs ready and polished. And if anything comes up like these ones here, these ones are live job adverts right now. Don't be disheartened by rejections, but just be ready to apply. So yeah, I hope I'm not went on too long there, but thank you very much for listening. I'm short but sweet. Hopefully it made some sense, but as I said, any follow-up questions, I'm happy to try and answer. So thank you.
No, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that.
It's
Um,
okay.
yeah, we've got a few questions for you, so I associate just be keeping track of them as well as the server we put up. So I'm just going to unmute her and then she'll just ask away. All right, there you go.
Hello. Thank you so much for that, Sarah. That was really, really interesting. Like, really interesting. I'm not even interested in the field, but I was like, maybe I should give this a go. But obviously it's not for me.
You should. It's good fun.
We have a question so far by Adwa. I hope I said that right. She says, do you find it difficult to get into a patent attorney traineeship with a master's as compared to a PhD?
Oh, honestly, no, I don't. And the reason I don't is because patent attorneys, so my friend Sam, who I work closely with, he's a trainee patent attorney and he has I don't think he even has a master's actually. No, he doesn't. But as I said, it's more like I think it's circumstantial because it's not something that's spoke about. It's a really, really niche job. But people who do PhDs tend to come in contact with patent attorneys because they need them. So unless you've got a family member who's a patent attorney or you know someone who does it, it's just unlikely. But I mean, I don't, you definitely don't need it, but I think maybe like, it's hard to say. You definitely don't need it as long as you've tried your best to show you're interested in it. But there are wee courses you can do online via WIPO. So that's the World Intellectual Property Office, and that's what I did actually. So I did some courses over summer, and I put them on my CV just to show that I was interested in it. So just be things like that, and that doesn't cost anything. That's stuff you can just sign up for and access, and it just shows that you've actually got a keen interest in the role. So you do a lot of patent attorneys do have PhDs, but it's not needed. And masters is
so Adwa says again, how do you think AI is affecting patents?
Affecting I don't know if it is, to be honest. Maybe. It depends. This is a really topical question because in one of my exams last week, it was to do with the patenting of an AI algorithm because AI can technically be patented. So yeah, it's to be confirmed. It's very all up in the air right now. But yeah.
Jack says, when you did your undergraduate, did you undertake any employability opportunities that helped improve your law job prospects?
No, I don't think so. Does that mean like internships?
I think they're trying to refer to what you can put in your CV to give you a heightened chance of opportunity.
Okay. Job. Yeah, so I worked the whole time I was at uni. Dexter knows this, but I worked in a jewelry store.
Yeah.
Yes, I worked there since I was 16, and
Same.
it was great because obviously my job's very client based, so that's one of the things that I really played on in all my interviews. I think when it comes to interviews, you just have to know, like, have your bullet points of things that you know you can play on, and then go ham on it. So when it came to like the client facing stuff, they were like, it's all about building a client portfolio and having good rapport with people. And I was like, do that day in, day out, like selling watches, selling diamonds, like working towards sales, like no bother. So yeah, so I just had a job, and then when I was in uni, when I was third year, the COVID happened, so all of our internships got cancelled. So that was a shame. I didn't actually get to do any internships, but I got through to the. Have you heard of the Saltire Scholarship? Is there anyone Scottish students here? No. That's really good. If there's any Scottish students, I think it's third year you can do that. So look into that because there's some really good internship opportunities there.
Natalia said, what are the key words you would use to search to help find jobs as an entry level?
In terms of patent and trademark attorneys, I would look for trainee roles or graduate. I think mostly they are referred to as trainee patent attorney or trainee trademark attorney. And go on the websites that I pointed you to. Go on to the Career IP Careers one because you can filter it by entry level. You tick the box and say that.
And Shriyan, what would you suggest a first year student such as myself to do to gain any insight into the field?
Is this into patents or trademarks or both?
Maybe they're referring to both.
Both. I would just like read up, go on the see the WIPO I was talking about. Let me see. I'll stay on after this and try and find some useful links and put them in the chat. But I would just it is a hard job, and I wanted to do this. Basically, the reason this came onto my radar is because I was always quite stressed about not knowing what I wanted to do when I left uni. So I remember when I was in second year uni, I went to my careers advisor and I was like, I don't know what to do, because when I was leaving school, I didn't know if I wanted to do law or if I wanted to do science or whatever. And she was like, have you ever considered patent attorney? Because then you can do both. You can mix both. You can use science and you can use law and work in the corporate world. So ever since then, I just had it in my head that's what I was doing. So I met up for coffees. I managed to get into contact with some attorneys and met up for coffees. People spoke to people as much as I could, connected people on LinkedIn, asked for any tips, things like that. So again, it was just about building the network. And then when a job came up, I had the person on LinkedIn, and I was like, that's what I'm applying for. So I would just try and connect as many people as possible and go onto some websites and do some reading about the field, especially as a first year student, because the traineeships are really difficult to get, and you the internships aren't really it's not really like GSK or any of these big firms. You can't really go in for 2 weeks because you're dealing with such sensitive information. So yeah, I'd say I hope that's helpful.
I have a question. So you
Okay.
said the traineeships are quite competitive. I know you previously mentioned doing some free courses that are online, but is
Mhm.
there any other things you feel like that could put someone at an edge or give them an advantage in you know, actually getting the traineeship?
I think, see the courses I mentioned, I do think they're quite good because they show your employer that you know enough about the area to know that this exists,
Yeah.
because you wouldn't know this existed just from looking it up. And then just, yeah, well, the reason that I did my master's is because, like, the reason I chose this specific one is because it had a course and it was to do with biobusiness. And part of that course was to pretend that you were part of a startup group, and it was all to do with getting your patents and getting investment and all that. So that's why I chose it. So then I was able to play on that in my course. And I was like, this is something that I've been thinking about for years. And here's the proof. So I think it's just showing that you're really interested in it, and thinking outside the box, things that will make you stand out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
It's okay.
All right, thank you so much for that. That was very insightful. I think I'm kind of like Ice. I was like, you know what? I wasn't really interested in I watched Suits and I was like, that wasn't me, but when like learning about it, I was like, you know what? That's quite interesting. But yeah, so what I'm gonna do is obviously I'm just gonna put your LinkedIn in the chat and people can connect with you. But again, just thank you so much for that and for all that insight as well. And some of those answers. So hopefully if anybody in here has been considering a career in sort of like intellectual property, this has given you some food for thought. And hope, you know, if you've not even considered that, you didn't even know that this was something that we could do, hopefully this is kind of like encourage you guys to like go out and do a bit more research, because I think what we'll come to find as we progress with this series of webinars is that there's just so many things that we can do that we probably just didn't even expect.
Mhm.
Yeah, so obviously just like big shout out and thank you to Sarah for coming in and then like just speaking to us a little bit about what she does. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for reaching out to me.
All right,
And
thank
best
you.
of luck, everyone, in your studies.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, so next up we have Dr. Emily Hobson, and she is a lecturer in pharmacology at the University of East Anglia, and she's the best lecturer. And I'm not just saying that because she's marking my exam next month, but yeah, so she's gonna come and speak to us about her journey. Just a little fun fact: she actually was in the first cohort of pharmacology students at UEA. So essentially, she's basically like a pioneer for me. But yeah, so she ended up doing her bachelor's, then she went on to do her PhD, which she completed last year. And something I never told you was that the switch from Emily Hobson to Dr. Emily Hobson, when I saw that in the emails, when I saw that everywhere else, I was like, yeah, like that's I'm so proud of you. Yeah. But so yeah, so to the floor, I'm gonna introduce Emily Hobson.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Fantastic. Right, so I've got some slides, so I'm just going to share those and hopefully you can see those. Can people see those okay? Okay, great. So yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to come and speak to you all, especially as Dexter has said, that, you know, I started out doing a pharmacology degree, which I now teach several students who are attending here today. So it's really nice to come and speak at this. So just as kind of a bit of an insight into my career, as Dexter said, I was part of the first cohort of pharmacology and drug discovery students at the University of East Anglia. In fact, this picture here is a picture from my graduation day. You can see we were quite a small cohort. In fact, I think we're almost outnumbered, or maybe are outnumbered by lecturers in this photo. But we were the first cohort, and so we ended up being quite a small cohort. But I will say that as I went through my degree, I was certainly having that feeling of what am I going to do next? I didn't particularly have any kind of plan as to what I wanted to do. And this will be a theme of this talk, is that I still don't really have a plan. But as I was going through my kind of undergraduate, I started to try and look into different careers and where I might want to end up. And as it happened, I was particularly interested in research. So I stayed on at the University of East Anglia studying a PhD. I've put in cancer pharmacology, but it's probably more cell biology, to be honest. And I was under the supervision of Professor Maria O'Connell, who is the lady in the left-hand side of the photo, and finished that last year. But during my PhD, I also got an opportunity to work part-time as a lecturer in cell biology. And part of the reason why I actually went for this was because I got to the end of my funded time of my PhD and basically needed some money. And so this opportunity came up and I decided to take it. So that provided me with 3 days a week pay so that I could work on writing up my PhD during the rest of the time. Once I finished my PhD, I then moved on to try and pick up some more hours so that I could have a bit more pay, essentially. And there was, just as it happened, an opportunity for 2 days a week working in School of Biological Sciences at UEA as a lecturer in immunology. So I picked that up, was doing both jobs, cell biology and immunology, for a year. And then this year, in September, I started full-time in, we're now called the School of Chemistry, Pharmacy and Pharmacology, but the same school that I did my undergraduate in at UEA. So I've kind of done a couple of hodgepodge jobs here and there, but now more focused in one particular area. And as part of that, then I've also had other opportunities to pick up additional training things. So for example, I've just this summer completed my postgraduate certificate in higher education practice, which is essentially just a small certificate to say that I've done some training in how to actually teach, which I'm sure my students will be glad to hear. So my current role, as I say, is lecturer in pharmacology, but I have additional things that I do alongside that. So I am the Outreach and Engagement Officer for the School of Chemistry, Pharmacy and Pharmacology. Essentially what that means is I just help to design and coordinate our outreach efforts and public engagement activities. This is something that is very close to my heart. I think it's extremely important. I think it's the job of every scientist to be trying to speak to the public and encourage more people to engage with science. So I'm very happy to be doing this role at the moment. And I also have involvement with a couple of other different societies and networks. So most notably, I have been involved with the British Pharmacological Society since my undergraduate. And Qasim is on the call at the moment. He's like the current engagement officer at the BPS. And so I still am a part of their early career pharmacologists advisory group. And I'm also a part of the Norwich Cancer Research Network. So although I'm kind of see a lot of my students as a lecturer, there are a couple of other things that I've been doing alongside that as well. So you might be thinking, why did I take this kind of particular route? And to be honest, I'm going to say that it was mostly by chance and just me trying different things and seeing what fit. So I'd say I started my career journey during A-levels, where I was studying biology, chemistry, English literature and psychology. This was at the time, I don't even know how A-levels are really set up anymore, but I dropped psychology for A2 level, so I kept those 3 subjects, English, biology and chemistry, on as kind of my main subjects. And so when it came to applying for university, I had a couple of different choices in mind. So the first one was, do I want to study English literature at university? There was a very small period of time where I thought maybe this was the route for me. Quickly realized that I had no idea what a career in that would even look like, and maybe it would be better for me if I just kept English literature as kind of a hobby. I really liked chemistry. Particularly at A-level, I was really enjoying the course. When I looked into chemistry degrees, I decided I didn't like inorganic chemistry, and so it wasn't really for me. And I quickly stumbled into pharmacy instead. So I actually went to a summer school hosted by the Sutton Trust, and basically went for a few days to go and see what it would be like to study a pharmacy degree. Again, from that, pretty much figured that I didn't actually want to spend that much time interacting with patients. I didn't really love looking things up in the BNF, so kind of pivoted from that onto pharmacology. So I ended up doing my undergraduate in pharmacology and drug discovery, and thoroughly enjoyed my degree, got to meet lots of different people, got to take part in a number of different events, attended conferences as much as possible. But when I got to kind of the last year of my degree, I was also in that situation of, I don't really know what I'm going to do next. It was probably the first time in life where I didn't have something immediately planned for me. So my school really pushed people to apply to university, even if they didn't want to go. And so you at least kind of had that thought of, well, I could just go to university if I'm not sure. But when you get to the end of your undergraduate, you might be thinking, well, there's not an obvious step for me now. What do I want to do? For a lot of people, they might want to move on to further study. So I particularly looked at master's programs. In particular, I was looking at a taught master's program focused on immunology. So that was an option for me. The thing that really put me off that was just the cost of it. So I think at the time when I looked, it was about £11,000 or £12,000 just for the tuition, which was very expensive. This was one in London, so sometimes they're a bit less expensive than that. But that kind of put me off because I just thought, do I really need to sink this much money into a degree if I'm not entirely sure what I want to do? The other option was I could just move home, try and find some kind of random job as much as possible, just save up a bit of money, or as most people do, we'll start looking into industry, so potentially working as a scientist in some industrial company. When I was doing my undergraduate, I knew that I was interested in research. I took part in a summer internship at Dr. Anastasia Sobolewski's lab, and from my undergraduate research project, I kind of thought, well, research interests me. You're doing different things every day. That's probably where I want to end up. But I kind of fell into that dip of, do I need to do a master's to do further research, or could I even just move straight into a PhD? And this is something I'll talk a bit about in a second. But essentially, I managed to get onto a PhD program, which was funded by the University of East Anglia. So I spent 4 and a bit years working on my PhD. Unfortunately, this was during the time when COVID hit, so we had a bit of disruption to my PhD, which meant that I worked on my PhD probably a bit longer than I would have liked. But that led me to the dilemma of how I was actually going to manage to finish my PhD and also manage to feed myself, which is why I ended up trying to find a part-time job to kind of supplement my income. But as I got towards the end of my PhD, I once again was thinking, what am I doing? I don't know what my next step is. Every time I sign up for one of these things, I'm just got 3 or 4 years of time planned out, and then I have no plan. And as most PhD students do, we reach a certain breaking point where we decide maybe we just want to actually go and work in a bakery, just avoid all of the stress of science and just start baking full time. As you can see, I did not do that, but I do think about it time to time. The other thing is people will often think about moving into a postdoctoral research role, either in academia or in industry. So I did look at a few postdoc programs, and I also looked at just general industry jobs as kind of basic scientists and things like that. But by this time I had applied for this lectureship that was part-time and was successful in getting that. So I had a little bit less time pressure on finishing up writing my PhD, but it also took me to where I am today. So there's, hopefully from this you can see there's a lot of points where I could have deviated and gone down a completely different route. And it is mostly just by chance that a lot of different opportunities kind of came up as I was making a decision, and I just kind of took a chance basically to pursue that opportunity. So what is it like working in academia? Well, it's very different depending on your particular role. As a lecturer, your work is quite varied. So most of my work is spent preparing and delivering teaching sessions. So whether that's lecturing or delivering workshops, and it's really different depending on the different people you're teaching. So I teach to pharmacy and pharmacology, and pharmacy is such a huge cohort compared to pharmacology that you have to learn how to adapt the way that you're speaking to people, which I think is one of the key skills that you can learn in science anyway. And a large chunk of my job is also just teaching admin. So this is, essentially marking work, designing different assessments, scheduling meetings, meeting with my advisees, all that kind of stuff that kind of goes along under the surface of an academic role. One of the most rewarding things I would say as part of this job is getting the opportunity to work quite closely with students. So I'm particularly keen to supervise undergraduate and postgraduate students in the lab. I think this is a really nice way to actually feel rewarded by your job. You can really see when people are developing skills and changing over time. There's quite a few students who I've worked with in this particular role where you've seen them gain confidence over the course of a few weeks, and it just makes you feel so happy that they're, getting to explore science, but they're learning things along the way. As part of that then, you may also be conducting research. So most lecturers in the UK will either be on a research or a scholarship contract. So mine is technically scholarship, but people who have big research groups are probably on those research contracts. But either way, you will be conducting research, whether that's lab-based or whether it's what we call pedagogical research, essentially, research about teaching people. So as part of that, you will be, if you're working in a lab, managing that lab, supervising students, designing your project, maybe applying for some grants. So you have to write up a grant proposal. And so there's a lot of other things that kind of go into the research side of being an academic. As I said, one of the things that really interests me is working in science outreach. So for me, I spend a big chunk of time trying to develop new activities or plan who's going to go to this event, how are we going to get there, all that kind of stuff. And like I say, I think this is really the job of everyone in science, but for us at university, we have quite a lot of links with primary and secondary schools and at just general science events going on in the local area. A lot of you may have been to a conference before, so just as you might attend a conference, academics are also attending conferences, either presenting their work or just attending so that they can keep in the loop with what's going on in their area. This is a really nice place to actually network with people, and I'd recommend if there are any conferences coming up that you're interested in, that you're able to get to, just to give it a go and just go along, try and meet different people. And then alongside all of this, an academic might also have external commitments. So either serving on a committee or a panel for a learned society, or they may be on an editorial board of a journal. And quite a lot of academics serve as external examiners for other universities as well. So essentially trying to make sure that everyone is getting the right level of teaching and assessment if they're on a higher education program. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop rundown of what an academic does. But what I will say is that one of the questions I get about this particular job is actually whether you need a PhD to do this. And I will say that it varies depending on the discipline you're looking at. But for pharmacology and for life sciences, you generally do need a PhD. This might be slightly different. So for example, on our pharmacy program, we have pharmacists who just have an MPharm degree who will then come and lecture. They don't necessarily need a PhD, but if you are looking at getting into this career, you'll notice that a lot of job adverts will ask for a PhD in a relevant field. So I thought I'd just give a quick rundown of what a PhD actually is. So a PhD is a Doctor of Philosophy, and in the UK this tends to be a 3 or 4 year degree where you'll spend time researching a particular quite niche topic in a research group. I will say that the length of time that you might be studying for in other places in the world might vary. So I know that in the US, people tend to spend upwards of 5 years working on a PhD project, and the way in which they might meet that qualification will differ. So in the UK, you have an exam. In the US, sometimes you will get your PhD once you publish so many papers. So if you're looking at a PhD, but you're looking maybe not in the UK, just note that it might vary. Most PhDs that I would recommend going for will be funded. So that could be funded by a university or by an external funder. So a lot of charities will fund PhDs, or learned societies might also as well. Essentially, what you're trying to do is you're developing yourself as a researcher. You're trying to answer a particular research question, but you'll also get the opportunity to build other skills like communication by going to national and international conferences as well. All of this kind of comes together, you write your thesis, it's essentially just a big book of all of the stuff you've done in your PhD, and you have to defend that to some external examiners. So basically they'll ask you questions on your PhD, ask you about your research, and you just have to be able to answer those questions. And this is called a viva voce. My PhD, as I say, was at the same university that I studied my undergrad at. So I was quite lucky that I worked with colleagues that I already knew quite well. And I got to work on a variety of different techniques in both pharmacology and medicinal chemistry. As part of that, I got the opportunity to attend different conferences. In particular, this picture on the bottom corner is when I went to Seville in Spain for the European Association of Cancer Research. So it's a chance for you to just go out and meet different people that you possibly wouldn't get to meet otherwise. And most PhD programs will have some kind of funding available for you to be able to travel to these places. A big experience for me in this was actually getting some teaching experience. So I worked as an associate tutor, or this might be called a teaching assistant, depending what university you're at the moment. Essentially, I just rocked up to labs, helped supervise the labs, helped do some marking, I delivered some lectures and workshops, but that really helped me when applying for my first lectureship, because if I didn't have that, it would have been hard for me to write very much on my CV, and in the interview, it gave me a chance to justify some of the reasons why I wanted to go into that career. You might then also get other opportunities to volunteer, which if you do have any of these opportunities to come up, I would say go for them. So I got involved with the Norwich Science Festival when I was still an undergrad, and I'm still involved with it today. And this just helps again to develop those teamwork and organizational communication skills that pretty much any job you're going for will want you to have. In terms of job opportunities, if you do pursue a PhD, I've already spoken a lot about kind of the academic side of things, but there's a huge variety of different careers that you could move into. We've already had someone speaking about kind of patent law, but other industry positions could be in marketing, business development. You could be working as kind of still staying in research, so actually as a scientific researcher, or you could move into something like science communication or medical writing. The main point I want to get from this is that when you do a PhD, the main thing that I would say you're working on is just building your skills as a person and as a researcher. But a lot of those skills you're building will be transferable to pretty much any career. And one of the key things that I think is a selling point for people when they come out of a PhD is they have that skill of resilience, because it's not easy to do a PhD. And the main reason it's not easy is because you have to keep motivating yourself when things don't work, and they sometimes really don't work. So you have to be able to, every time something goes wrong, maybe your experiment doesn't work, pick yourself up, try again, build that skill of resilience, which in any career you will need. In terms of the application process, the easiest way to find a PhD is by going on findaphd.com. More and more are actually being advertised on LinkedIn, and you'll find these on university websites as well. My main advice, if you're interested in studying a PhD, is have a look at all the different PhDs available. They're normally advertised in November and January time. And email the supervisor, discuss with them the project, show that you're interested, and then make sure that you tailor your application to that particular PhD. Most will require just an undergraduate degree, usually at 2-1. Some might specify that they want a master's degree. I didn't do a master's degree. I know a multitude of people who didn't do a master's degree and went on to do a PhD. So by no means do you need a master's to start studying a PhD. Some people will say it's useful because you get extra practical experience, but I would say that you can get that same experience from doing a summer internship or as part of your undergraduate project. It's all about selling yourself. So just make sure that you write your application carefully. And then when you get to the interview stage, just make sure that you're prepared like you would for any interview. So what do I most enjoy about my job? Well, I think the most rewarding thing is just working with students, seeing them develop and seeing them do amazing things like this particular network being set up. I also have a multitude of colleagues that I really enjoy working with and who have supported me a lot throughout my career. There's a lot of different opportunities to continue your own personal and professional development. So even now I'm still doing training courses and things like that to help me gain more skills. No day is ever the same. You're doing a bunch of different things every day. Quite often I start my day with a plan and then it changes anyway. So you've got to be a little bit flexible, but that works for most people in academia. And yeah, you just get to kind of have a bit more freedom with that. Whereas if you move into a job like industry, there might be people checking more on what you're doing kind of day to day. And then the other thing is with science in any form, I think you have those opportunities to get involved with the wider scientific community and speak to people about why science is so interesting. So I wanted to have a little bit on challenges. And I will say that I would love to sit here and tell you that science is, about what you know. I would love to tell you that if you work really hard and you get good grades, that you'll instantly get your dream job out the door. Unfortunately, most jobs, and particularly science, is not really that way. You do have to try and network with people. A lot of it is about who you know. And I've had a lot of conversations with people working in a variety of different careers in science where they've said they've got their positions because they've networked with people. And this is the same for me. If I wasn't at UEA, I wouldn't have known about these opportunities. And so just try and make sure you keep your network as wide as possible. So as you've been already told on here, LinkedIn is very important, but attending things in person, making sure people know your face, those are all really important. PhDs, I will say, are not super well funded, particularly compared to graduate jobs. So do be prepared that you might not be on the best pay if you are considering a PhD. But once you finish your PhD, hopefully you can then transition to a job which is a bit better paid. And I will say that there is a lot more work to be done for science to be inclusive and accessible. This is something that I think we all have a role to play in science, but I would be a liar if I sat here and told you that there was no barriers to particular groups of people, because it is challenging sometimes. And work-life balance can be difficult, particularly if you're working a lot of temporary or part-time contracts. I don't think this is unique to academia, but it is quite rife in academia at the moment, particularly if you're looking at the kind of higher education sector at the moment. There are a lot of job cuts going on across UK universities, so it can be quite stressful at times. My main tips really is to find supportive mentors. So I'm really grateful to my PhD supervisor, Professor Maria O'Connell. She has been endlessly supportive to me, and I've known quite a few people who have found groups of people that have helped them through their career. Network all the time, as much as possible. Try and keep those doors open as much as possible, and just be aware that things might change, and just try and get comfortable with things not working out. With that said, the things that I wish I knew earlier is that your career will never be just one straight path. You might have to chop and change between different things. But in order to do that, you just got to be able to say yes to opportunities when they come up and just see where it takes you. And my general life advice to everyone, and advice that I'm still trying to take myself, is that pretty much nothing in life is make or break. Things will work out, things will improve. So just be kind to yourself and don't sweat the small things. And that is particularly true for career advice, because you never know what's going to come up tomorrow. So these are just my contact details. I'm happy to stay on the chat if anyone has any questions. And yes, thank you for having me today.
All right, thank you so much. That was so insightful. I think you might remember that. Well, probably don't, but you have a lot of things to worry about. But I asked you earlier on about sort of like doing a PhD after the graduate course. And I was supposed to get a meeting with you, but I never did because I just thought it seems so overwhelming. So it was kind of nice to like finally have that conversation, even though it didn't happen. But yeah. So yeah, I'm just gonna unmute Isosa and then she's gonna just ask a few questions that we've got.
Hello again. So the first question I have is from Shriyan. She says, what does being a postdoctoral researcher in industry entail? I think you briefly went through that. So
it's a good question. And it really depends on what company you go to work for. So industry kind of encompasses anything from big pharmaceutical companies like AstraZeneca and GSK to smaller biotech companies. There's a lot in Cambridge, for example, spin out companies from academia or startups. So it depends on the kind of particular area that you want to move into. But essentially a postdoctoral researcher would be, once you've got your PhD, you would then go and research there. Typically, because you've got your PhD, there tends to be a pay difference between someone just working a graduate role in industry. But you can work your way up, even if you just go straight from your undergrad into a role at one of these companies. So it doesn't block you out at all if you don't do a PhD. Day to day, that could be you're working towards a particular research project. So companies will often have several projects going at once, depending on the size of the company. You might be assigned to a particular project, you'll work on that, you'll collect data and report that to your manager. What I will say with industry, that although I've never worked in industry myself, I have friends who work in industry who say that because the company's priorities can change, you may get moved from project to project. So it's something where you have quite often a little less flexibility with what you're actually working with, but you are there to provide that insight as well. So you're working as an expert in that area.
Okay. And another question would be, how were you able to handle the jump between undergraduate and PhD? Because I know a few people who have gone through that route. And even talking to the PhD student I had for my project, she was basically saying that a lot of people find it very difficult to kind of be in a position of quite a lot of support in undergraduate to going straight to PhD, and just kind of figuring things out by yourself is a very difficult task for them. So what like advice would you give, and like how would you say you went through it?
That's a really good question. I think it's definitely something that it is quite a big step up. So you go from having a particular timetable where you rock up to events and things are kind of planned for you, to you have to plan your own day. The kind of PhD I was in was, if I didn't come in and I didn't do anything, nothing would ever get done for my project, and no one would split my cells or anything. So you have to be quite motivated to be working on your project. So to start with, I would say choose a PhD that really interests you. It would be a nightmare to work on a project that you hate for 4 years, and it would be very difficult to motivate yourself. The other thing is just to try and make sure that you have a good support network. So your PhD supervisor should be your main point of contact. I was very lucky with my PhD supervisor. I already knew her before I went into my PhD, and I knew that she was a nice and helpful person. I know several people who did not have that experience. Please, if you're applying for PhDs, when you go to interview or you're considering applying for a PhD, try and speak to that supervisor, get a feel for what they're like. Again, it's another case where I'd love to tell you that everyone in academia is very nice and well-meaning. A lot of people are not. So make sure that you vibe well with that particular person and that they suit your particular style of working, because it may be that you're working on something for a very long time just by yourself. So make sure that you can have those regular, touch base with them regularly. But I would say the main thing is to just try and keep a regular schedule like you would for yourself at university, especially in that transition period. And then once you get used to some of the techniques you're working with and you're more confident with your area, then it should just come kind of like second nature to you then. But it can be challenging. And yeah, it's just kind of an adjustment process, I would say.
Another question. I know you did say that like to pick a good topic that you would be motivated and interested in, how were you able to pick a specific topic that you could do for 4 years? And what advice would you give in helping those who are potentially looking at a PhD and what topic they would like to choose?
Yeah, so it can be difficult because a lot of PhDs, especially if anyone's looking at them, you'll notice they're extremely detailed. Like it's a very niche area most of the time. What I would say is choose an area, first of all, like a more broad area that you're interested in. So I was interested in cancer research. I know a lot of people who are interested in neurodegenerative disease or immunology. Choose that as kind of your first starting point and search for PhDs in that area and filter it down as you go. You might also think about where you actually want to live for 4 years, because you might not want to move, all the way to a different part of the country. Maybe you want to stay near where you already are, or you have family you want to be around. So think about that as well. But what I would say is if you're trying to decide whether you could work on that for a while, is start reading the papers of the group that you're applying for a PhD with. And if you're bored already by reading the abstract of their paper, then it's probably not for you. But if you can read their paper and you think, actually, this has sparked some question in me that I want to speak to that supervisor about, or you even just think, oh, I don't really get that, but I'm really interested to know what that means and I want clarification, that I think is an idea that you are actually interested in that topic and you're not just reading it because you feel like you have to. If that makes sense.
Definitely. You are, like, you're my lecturer as well, but going from the position of being a lecturer, and I know you said you were in Anastasia's lab, how do you think it would be going from the lecturing position to maybe like running an academic lab in the way that she does? What pipeline would you say you might have to go through for that?
Sure. So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of move into that. So one of the key things that people will use to pivot from sort of finishing up their PhD and doing a postdoc or two into setting up their own lab is by doing a fellowship. So this is essentially a period of time where you're funded by either a charity or an organization. Sometimes even the government can fund you. So UKRI is the funding body for the UK government, and they fund the Future Leaders Programme. And so you may have even been taught by people on this particular programme. That basically, it's competitively funded, so you have to come up with your research idea. You probably need a few papers behind you already, so you need to be publishing in your PhD or in your postdoctoral research. You would get awarded, so much funding. You basically have check-ins with that people who have funded you to say, this is where we're at in the project. But that sets you up for kind of starting your own group, because you'll get money into your lab. And you may even get, as part of that, a postdoc to research with you, or you may get a PhD student funded through that who can start researching alongside you. What I will say is that those are quite competitive, so you need to be sort of thinking about that when you get into kind of postdoc. You need to start thinking about where you want to move into in order to build up to that. I think it's hugely rewarding. I mean, having worked in quite a few labs, it's exciting to be part of a new lab group, and you can gain a lot from working with different people. So I think, again, it's all about sort of getting different opinions on things, networking with people, and trying to come up with your own ideas, which is always the big challenge, I think.
Thank you so much.
All right, so does anybody have any more questions, or? All right, so thank you so much, Emily, for all of that. That's very insightful. I've taken a few notes for myself as well, because I think I still have a lot to think about in terms of like what I'm going to do after I graduate in the next few months. But yeah, again, just thank you so much for that. I've put Emily's LinkedIn in the chat as well, so I'm sure if you're happy to yeah, if you have any questions, you can just like add her, and then like she might be able to like answer them a bit more. If you guys like, I don't know, like are awake at 3 a.m. revising and suddenly you think of the best question to ask her. But yeah, so thank you again for that as well. We are going to take just a short break, so we'll come back at about 20 past, and then we'll continue the second half of the webinar. So it's going to be with Qasim, who is a community engagement officer for the British Pharmacological Society. And then we're going to finish off with Dannielle, who is, I have to read it because it's such a long title. It sounds so cool. Associate Modeling and Simulation Research Fellow. English isn't my first language. I try my hardest. But yeah, so that's what's next up. So right now, obviously, we can all go have a little, I don't know, toilet break, drink water. And then if we come back at around 20 past, if that works with everybody. And then we can just like continue with the last half of the webinar. All right, see you all soon. Thank you. Are people back? Right. Yeah, could we get like a cheeky thumbs up just so I know how many people are back? Hello, hello, hello. Okay, so Natalia is here, Alice is here. Okay. All right, okay. That's fine. Yeah, we'll get started on the second half. Let's see. All right. Okay, yeah, I think people are back now. That's fine. All right, yeah. So hope you guys had a refreshing break. So yeah, we are starting off with the next portion of the webinar. And firstly, we are going to hear from Qasim. So Qasim graduated from Queen Mary's in pharmacology not too long ago. And now he works as a community engagement officer for the British Pharmacological Society. If you've been to any BPS event, you'll always notice the hair first with Qasim. Like if you just like hair flowing in the wind, like just know that that's him. Um, but yeah, so yeah, Qasim, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dexter, and the SPN team for inviting me. I'm sorry I don't have any slides, so I hope you guys don't mind my face. But yeah, let's get into it. Hi, everyone. I'm Qasim Abbassi, and I currently work as the Community Engagement Officer at the British Pharmacological Society, or the BPS. I studied pharmacology at Queen Mary at University of London, and I graduated in 2021, so not too long ago. But I didn't really go down the traditional route of like research or like clinical route. Instead, I found a path that brings together science, people, and communication. And today, I just wanted to talk you through how my degree helped me build a varied career, leading to a role that allows me to share science with different audiences and actually have fun doing it, because a job doesn't always have to be hard work, you know what I mean? But yeah, so my first job after graduating university, I was a laboratory technician at a stem cell bank known as Smart Cells International in West London. So it's a private stem cell banking company. I worked directly with umbilical blood and tissue samples, where I was basically responsible for extracting stem cells, maintaining their viability, and cryopreserving them. So if people do want to go down a lab route, I would definitely recommend doing a research project in their final year university, as opposed to the qualitative paper that you could do. That's only if you want a skill set to do with that, and I always recommend having a varied skill set, because it will always help. It will always help you throughout your different walks of life. So I would definitely do that. This job was really demanding. It demanded high precision. I had to follow very strict aseptic techniques to avoid contamination. I would have to wear like 2 hazmat suits, cover my face, big goggles, cover my hair, and by the time I would take it off, it looked like I had an accident, because I would look so sweaty and insane. But it was a really rewarding job, knowing how I was helping people. If in any case in the future their children needed any therapeutic intervention, I felt very proud of the work that I was doing, and I essentially ensured that each sample was met with international safety standards. So yeah, I worked with over around 20 samples a day. Each sample took around an hour to process, so I would work with 4 samples at once, and it was really demanding, but again, very rewarding. And it was critical that everything was processed and documented to the T, so very correctly and according to the book. So yeah, my degree really did help me for this kind of role. Like, I understood the science behind cell viability and quality control, but also how important those cells could be for future therapeutic use. But still, I started to notice that even though I was really good at the technical work, what really interested me was how we explained what we did, whether it was to trainee staff or like new clients that we got, to explain them what the science behind what we were doing, and others that were unfamiliar with the science. And also, I really just don't think I was exactly suited for the role. So I did the role for around a year, got all the skills that I needed, put all the skills that I knew to work, like flow cytometry and data analysis and all that. But ultimately, I think that I flourish a lot more in a people environment. Even though I had a really good team there, I just think that it was lacking in that because it was me just confined alone in a lab, in a processing lab for like hours on end, and I was slowly like, you know, going a bit cuckoo. But no, it was I learnt a lot from that job, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But yeah, so that was like my first sign for me that I might want to do more than lab work. So I left that after a year, and then I wanted to go on a bit of a solo venture. So I started up a private tutoring type of business, you can say. It wasn't too much of a big business. I had around 7 to 10 students, and I would teach I would be a GCSE and A level biology, chemistry, and sociology. Sociology being the A level, and GCSE for chemistry and biology. I really enjoyed being part of the students' learning process and their journeys, especially helping them like understand complex scientific ideas in ways that actually clicked for them. So that's kind of where my passion for science communication arose. But I also realized something else, that whilst I did love teaching science, you could say, I didn't necessarily want to go down the full path of becoming a qualified school teacher, because I did this again for around a year, and I was starting to love it as days went by. But some of my friends are teachers, and again, it seems like a very demanding job. You know, having 5 to 6 different classes of 30 students is very demanding, and the PGC route just didn't feel right for me at that time, especially with the cost of around £10,000, which at the time wasn't feasible. So yeah, what I took away from that experience essentially was I had a real passion for science communication, and I didn't necessarily need a classroom to make an impact. So I just needed to find a role where I could help make science a lot more accessible and engaging to different groups of people. And whilst I was doing this, whilst I was doing my tutoring services, I decided to actually expand my skill set in other areas as well, especially in areas that support communication. So I was from the start, for quite a young age, I was really interested in marketing. So my current role, it kind of blends a lot of things together, like science communication, outreach, and marketing as well, and analytics. I've always been interested in marketing, so I completed a mini virtual internship, we could say, with Lululemon on the platform Forage. I always recommend Forage. It's really, really good. Back in the day, it was only a few. It was a few kind of courses that you could do, but now it's expanded a lot. It has banking, pharmaceuticals. It has so many things that you could actually learn from, and employers love seeing this on your LinkedIn profile, because it just shows that you are really passionate about the subject or the field that you're trying to go into, and that you really are immersing yourself within the field, and they love that type of stuff. So I always recommend to check out the platform Forage to do these mini internships. You can do them in a week. I did mine in literally 2 weeks. They give you a set of tasks and you complete them. But it's actually a task that people within those positions formally would actually do. So it gives you a little taster of what is expected of you in that role that you're currently checking out. So I would always recommend Forage. So do check it out. It was extremely enlightening. I learned about stuff like campaign planning, audience targeting, and the importance of digital storytelling. And these are the kind of skills that are surprisingly transferable to science, especially when you consider how much scientific communication now happens online and through social media, like TikTok. TikTok has a STEM platform. YouTube has one too. YouTube Shorts. It's very saturated with science communication. So scientists and the thing is that scientists and organizations often struggle to connect with the audience. And me doing this type of marketing courses and learning about marketing tools can really help bridge that gap together. And then I went traveling for a bit, and the country I was traveling in, I saw an opportunity to do a copywriting internship with a television corporation, and I did that. It's something that I'm also very interested in, like animation and digital storytelling, of course. So I thought, why not try something creative? I think as a engagement officer, it's always quite important to stay connected to your creative side in a world that can be quite black and white, you know, especially in the sciences. It doesn't always have to be, but that's the kind of vibe we get when we think of science, like, you know, hard and, you know, like to the core. But always stay tuned to your creative side if you want to go into scientific communications or anything along that line, and anything to do with digital stuff. It's always good to dive into your creative side. So yeah, I learned how to write stuff like scripts and tailor information so that it's clear and easily digestible for all kinds of audiences, from young to elderly. And so yeah, these 2 internships taught me how to communicate with people from like a wide range of backgrounds and ensure that even technical information can be understood without oversimplifying it. So I'll always recommend doing these little courses to enhance your skill set, because skill set is what is going to get you your job. And the more skills you have, the better candidate you will be for any type of job, no matter what. So yeah, definitely do look into courses and internships that you can do if possible. So then yeah, after I completed those, I didn't leave my tutoring services, but kind of shut that down. And then around a month later, I started this role. So it brings me to where I am right now. I'm a community engagement officer at the BPS. So in this role, I get to combine everything that I've learned ever since I've graduated, or even before uni, kind of. So like scientific knowledge, communication, outreach, and strategy. And yeah, so in this role, the main focus is mostly all about outreach. As Emily said, it's really important for scientists to, interact with those from the wider public and enlightening them about science, because science is all around us. So we mostly focus on organizing public lectures, especially at our annual meeting, this year it's known as Pharmacology 2025, and it's happening in Belfast. So do come if you can. I'll be there too, so we can all connect. We also create engagement material designed for school children and GCSE and A-level students, like posters, stuff like what does X drug do, like aspirin or paracetamol, what career paths you can go following A-levels and pharmacology graduation, if you want to go into pharmacological role and everything like that, which is something, again, I really enjoy doing. So yeah, the job is a very good balance between science and people, which is exactly what I was looking for. I really do thrive in these type of environments. I get to attend events across the UK and sometimes outside the UK as well, like drug discovery. So previously I went to Drug Discovery 2024, which is just passed, which is where I met amazing individuals in the field, like where I met Dexter. And again, over here in these type of events, we promote pharmacology to the public and to future scientists on behalf of the British Pharmacological Society. And yeah, I also work closely with other learned societies, such as the Royal Society of Biology, the Biochemical Society, the Physiological Society, Royal Society of Chemistry. I get to work with a lot of people from these different societies. Sometimes we also get to go to Parliament and talk to some ministers and Parliament staff, and it's always very enlightening to see how we can actually have a change in policy and wider society. And working with other learning societies, we support early career researchers in hosting their own international symposia. It's really exciting to see where we can help create opportunities for themselves in science. So this year, we funded around 3,000 each to teams in Portugal and Nigeria to host their own symposia, and they're currently going along with it, and it will be completed in summer. So it's always very rewarding knowing how we're actually actively helping people build their own portfolio in the sciences. And yeah, I'm also able to use all these skills that I learned from as a copywriting intern recently, where the team and I developed a script for an animation that we produced on YouTube about psychedelics and treatment-resistant depression. You can go check it out, which is very exciting and a novel concept to talk about, because it's something that's quite taboo within the scientific community, talking about psychedelics and all these alternative modes of treatment. But we got to work with Professor David Nutt, who's a very famous psychopharmacologist who is based in Imperial College London, I think. But yeah, it's always a pleasure working with David Nutt. He also spoke at our public lecture at Pharmacology 2024 last year. So it's always nice getting to connect and network with all these amazing individuals who make such an impact within all over the world. So yeah, some other bits of the role, I also handle engagement grants, which is essentially where members of the society, they would propose an activity that they want funding for, and they can claim up to around £2,000 for it. And it's all about engaging with the public, hosting activities, any learning material or any like leaflets or stuff like that. And we support them on it. We also look after the student society funding, which is where we fund a small amount of money to student societies across universities across the UK, which is always nice to see engaged students hosting their own little events, which always looks good in your CV. And I also look after awards such as the Excellence in Pharmacology Teaching, and the Sir James Black Award, which is particularly my favorite because it kind of combines all of the pharmacological knowledge that I learnt in university. This is basically where we assess newly approved drugs from the EMA, FDA, and MHRA, invite the manufacturers to present to us, and then choose the most impactful drug of the year. And I really get to dive into mechanisms of action, the clinical data, because I handle all of the admin of it. So I have to look and filter if the drug is appropriate, if they have an appropriate mechanism of action, if they are novel drugs first in class. And it's really nice knowing that my degree is really helping me with these type of initiatives, because I am one of the only staff members at the BPS that actually has a pharmacology degree. So it's nice to know that the degree comes in clutch. So yeah, but yeah, ultimately, I would say being an engagement officer is very rewarding. I get to connect with so many people from so many walks of lives that I never thought I would be able to. So it's always nice to see different faces, different people hear different stories from all over the world, especially on annual meeting. So yeah, I don't really particularly work in a lab anymore, but I still do use my degree every day. So pharmacology isn't, your career choices don't just end within the lab. They can take you a lot further than that. I know so many of my colleagues, not my colleagues, so many of my peers who are in university with me, they've gone into like equity, they've gone into law, they're going to so many things, and it can be quite confusing, but just know that if you stay focused and you have that vision will come to you, you know what I mean? You'll get it one day. Just keep on doing with those courses and stuff like that. They are very, very helpful. I'll always recommend those courses. So yeah, like all in all, if you're considering a career in science communication or engagement specifically, I'd really encourage you to focus on developing your core skills and branching out in your skills as well. So, like strong written and verbal communication, audience awareness, adaptability, and a solid understanding of the science itself so that you can explain it in like digestible ways. So being able to explain these complex concepts really clearly, and in a way that resonates with different groups, especially from the public, is the biggest key. And I would also recommend looking out for internships, volunteer roles where you can, or share virtual programs, as I mentioned, Forage, that give you experience in these areas like public outreach, marketing, writing, or education, or any sort of field that you want to go into. And really do optimize your LinkedIn. I always emphasize that as well, because optimizing your LinkedIn, talking about every single thing that you're doing, the skills that you learned from it, what you learned, how you could have done stuff better. Employees love that stuff so much. And LinkedIn is where I have gotten all of my jobs, like literally every single job that I've gotten. I've had a number of jobs over the year. Every single job I've gotten is all on LinkedIn. So I really do recommend you optimizing your LinkedIn as much as you can, to the best of your ability, of course. But yeah, ultimately your degree like gives you the foundation, but how you apply it and how you build on it, that's what opens the doors for you. So yeah. I hope that didn't drag on too long. So I'm more than happy to take any questions that you guys have now.
All right. Thank you so much for that. That was more than what I thought. And I already know that like you do a lot. So for you to say all of that, and it's like there's even more to that. No wonder you were late for my presentation at the last. It's fine. So yeah, before I actually like bring up ISOSA, I have a question because I'm gonna be selfish a little bit. But so because I shameless plug, but because I post a lot of like my course content, etc., on social media, that kind of stuff. Um, I never thought that that was science communications until somebody was like, "Oh yeah, science communications is important." Da 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 da.
Mm.
So for yourself working in science communication, what do you think the importance of like having people our age kind of be not just getting into the field, but being more aware of science communications and just like how well we as scientists translate all these complex things to like just like non-STEM people? Because I think
Mm.
science is fun, but I've always kind of said that I feel like sometimes the way that like science is explained makes it seem as if like we don't have fun. But when I was in the lab growing them fungi, like I was having a blast. So yeah, so for yourself, like in your sort of like sector, what do you think the importance of having more Gen Z, more people sort of like our age range, being aware of science communications and getting into it as well? And how could like what are different areas that they can get into, if that makes sense? Or different.
Yeah, so yeah, in terms of science communication, the biggest foundation that I would say when you get into it is definitely how to make it as easy comprehensible for all is to just essentially think that, especially when it comes from non-STEM, when we're talking about non-STEM, people just think that you're talking to basically a baby, and you have to, this literally, this is how I was trained. You have to dumb it down, not dumb it down, but simplify it so much to the point where you're acting like you're talking to a baby, keeping it simple so that it's digestible and it actually sticks in their head, and that they're actually able to remember it going down the line. It's not something that's just in one ear out the other. It's something that actually sticks, and they can, process it and actually apply it into their life and really understand the magnitude of its importance, especially when it comes to science and stuff like, vaccines and medication, how you shouldn't, if you have a medication course for 2 weeks, you shouldn't just complete 1 week and be like, yeah, I'm okay now, because that's going to cause stuff like antimicrobial resistance and stuff like that. So essentially just dumb it down as much as possible. And honestly, I feel like us Gen Z, not saying that we're dumb at all, but I'm saying that we know how to code switch quite well, and we know how to use our language really appropriately when it comes to different audiences. When it comes to Gen Z, we are really good at that. Like we just know who is going to understand what. Because I
Yeah.
feel like we can empathize a bit and we can put ourselves into the shoes of the audience. And essentially, if that's something that you do lack, I would literally say follow some science communicators on social media platforms and just learn how they do it. So for example, one of my close friends, her name is Yasmin Dickinson. She's a PhD student. She has her own platform known as a cardiac scientist on Instagram and
Okay.
TikTok. She does really well with her science communication, and it's something that you just pick up once you see, like, it's like kind of like coding. Once you see the foundations of it all, you'll see what type of language you have to use, and then you can also, look at how we have a lot of society material that is for the wider public, and you can see the type of language we use, how we format it, how much information we include. So yeah, being wary of those parameters is something that really does help me, because that's something I did struggle with a bit before, but after a few weeks, it's something that I picked up quite quickly. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'll leave to Isosa to just ask the remaining.
Hi. So we have some questions in the chat. So Luna asks, how were you able to begin your career in stem cell banking?
Okay, so in stem cell banking, essentially what I did, okay, so there's two things that I would say. You optimize your CV really, really good, and you optimize your LinkedIn really, really good as well. So from how I got into stem cell banking is that I did a research project. It was with adrenocortical carcinoma, which is essentially we were just testing out how the cells react within people who have adrenal cancer. And I learned a lot of skills like flow cytometry, of course, aseptic technique, um, gel electrophoresis, is that what it's called? But we learned a lot more than that. And um, I just put that onto my CV, and I made sure that my skills within my CV reflected what they were looking for. And many people do say that you have to be quite experienced to become a stem cell banker. But once you have these skills unlocked, once you have them, once you have even started them, you don't essentially even have to know them perfectly, because we got trained in the stem cell banking role. As long as you know the science behind why it's done and you have a vague idea of it, that is something that employers accept, and they will put you on a training course, which in every job they will train you, and then yeah, you'll go up from there. So yeah, definitely putting all your skills that are reflective of the job, in this case stem cell banker, making sure the skills that you know from your research project. This is why I kind of emphasize a research project, because having these skills is so essential. Having a number of skills is always essential. So I would always recommend a research project rather than the qualitative research. So yeah, having these skills and making sure that they reflect the stem cell banker skills is something that they would definitely hire you. It was rather easy for me. So yeah, I would say yeah, the skills optimization.
And then Maya says, is there any way students can get involved with any type of work in the BPS as she's a first year student?
Yeah, so mostly what we do have at this point, we mostly, when it comes to first year students, unfortunately, it can be quite difficult to kind of collaborate with them. The most that we do is have them volunteer at our annual meeting, which is in this case Pharmacology 2025, where you can help, set up the events, you can get insight, you will obviously get free registration. You can get insights into all the different type of boot camps, the workshops, the career events that happen and go on. And then again, obviously, we will provide you with a statement of involvement. So you can always have that statement on your CV from us, which always looks good. So yeah, or what you can also do is if you ever want to produce some engagement material, that is something that I look over. You can get in touch with me and we can see how we can find a middle ground and give you like a mini project to work on. Of course, we know because you're a first year student, we wouldn't want to take too much of your time. But yeah, we can find something where we can find a middle ground. And also we've the Early Career Pharmacologist Advisory Group, which is the early career committee that we have. We've recently opened it up to undergraduates. So the next call for applications will be in a few months' time. So do keep an eye out for that. So that's another way you can get involved with the society. So yeah.
Thank you. And lastly, what advice would you give to people who would want to be in this role, but are maybe lacking confidence, and what they can do to build their confidence in maybe understanding how to engage with people and yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, honestly, a few years ago, I used to struggle a lot with anxiety and stuff like that, as we do after lockdown, you know what I mean? The one way that I really did overcome it is just realizing that everyone's the same, like we're all people, like no one's out to get me, breathing deep and just connecting with people and just just making sure that I'm communicating with them in a respectable manner. I'm having we finding common grounds, being energetic and joyful. It can get quite daunting sometimes, I have to admit, because I sometimes do have to speak on like large platforms or some lectures and stuff like that. It can be a bit scary, but the only thing that's going to help it might not help you, but everyone's different, you know what I mean? But in my experience, what helped me a lot was was exposure therapy. So at the start, I did not like I did not like doing all of these like, lectures and, student talks and stuff like that. But as time went on, it's something that I got more comfortable with. And it's something that I started actually really enjoying. And it's a skill that is really, really prized. It's a really good skill. It can take you far, you know what I mean? And it really does build your confidence. It really builds your self-esteem and how you view yourself, your self-concept. So yeah, I know it might seem untraditional, but yeah, do exposure therapy. That's something that really did help me.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Qasim.
Thank you so much
So
for
yeah,
having me.
thank you so much for that. Hopefully we can get more people coming into science communications because I just feel as if like we need to make science fun again. That's my slogan. But yeah,
Exactly.
thank you so much for that. And hopefully, anybody that was thinking, do you know what, the lab isn't for me per se, and I can't really think of anything, but I know I'm good at, public speaking. I know I'm good at engagement. I know I want more engagement with other people, and a variety of people as well. Hopefully they can now consider or science communications and working for the BPS as well. So thank you again for that as well.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
So yeah, so last but not least, we have Dannielle Ravenhill. And so she works in industry and she works as a associate. I have to look it up again because it just always blows my mind. Uh, associate simulation. She'll tell you all about it, guys. But it's an impressive role, and she was telling me a little bit about it as well. I had never considered it, and to me, it just seems as if like kind of like predicting the future a little bit, but not exactly. But yeah, so I'll invite Dannielle to hopefully correct me on the title of the job itself, but then to also tell us what she does and how she got into that as well.
Thanks, Dexter. I will just share my screen. Give me a moment, it's been a little bit slow. Fab, can you see my slides? Yeah, perfect. Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for sticking along today. I know that we're nearly out of time, so I'll make this as quick as possible so that everyone can start their weekends. And a big thanks to Maria for inviting me to be part of this panel. Things like this didn't really exist when I was at uni, and I would have really benefited from listening to this webinar. So I'm really happy to be a part of this community and help where I can. So yeah, a little bit of an introduction about me and my very long job title. That is a bit of a trend in industry. There are these ridiculously long titles that don't really mean anything. But yeah, so I'm an Associate Modelling and Simulations Research Fellow, which I'm technically just a PBBK modeler. And on the next slide, I will go into a little bit more detail about what that entails. I work at a company called Quotient Sciences. Quotient Sciences is a CDMO, which again in pharma there's a lot of acronyms and abbreviations, but that means Contract Development and Manufacturing Organization. And essentially what that means is we're kind of like a CRO. We don't develop drugs ourselves, but we're a service provider for other companies, so big pharma, smaller biotechs, startups, academic groups, and they will outsource their work to Quotient, and we will carry out a service for them. So the services that Quotient do, drug substance development and manufacture, drug product development and manufacture, so developing specific formulations. The main core of Quotient's work is we're a phase 1 clinical trial centre. So that's mainly doing clinical trials in healthy volunteers, often first in human studies, the first time a drug has ever been dosed to man. And we do also different clinical pharmacology studies, which involved taste tests, so kind of optimizing the taste of a tablet, DDI studies, food effect studies, so a whole host of things. I think as Emily mentioned, in pharma, there's various different types of companies. You've got your big pharma, you've got CRO like Quotient, you have the smaller biotechs, you have startups. There's a lot of AI kind of based tech pharma companies now as well. So there's a whole range. And I think we were discussing before the webinar started, there isn't just pharma, as an industry that you can go into as a pharmacology graduate. There's also cosmetics, agriculture, supplements, veterinary kind of medication. These are all things that I never considered. I just kind of went in the more traditional pharma route. But yeah, there's a lot of different industries that you can kind of dive into and get involved in. So what is PBBK modeling? So PBBK modeling stands for physiologically based pharmacokinetic modeling. It's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially it's a mathematical approach, a bottom-up approach that integrates compound properties such as solubility, lipophilicity, pKa, how much a compound is metabolized, its stability in different matrices, if it binds to protein plasma, if it partitions between blood and plasma, all of these different properties, and actually properties that are unique to the formulation itself, so difference in dissolution, extent of dissolution, and combines these along with physiological parameters. And I think this is the key part of PBK modelling and what sets it apart from other types of modelling. So it considers the different physiological parameters such as tissue volumes, blood flow, the pH of different compartments in the GI tract, the transit time of a drug that it takes to move down the GI tract, bile salt concentrations. So it incorporates all of these things, and ultimately what you end up with is a concentration time profile and a prediction of how a drug is going to behave in vivo. And so there's lots of applications of how PBBK modeling can be used, not limited to what I have on the slide here. These are just a few examples. So one thing it can do is it can give you a mechanistic understanding of some of the processes behind your PK. For instance, if you have some nonlinear clearance, or it's a substrate of a specific transporter, or if you want to know if your compound is solubility or permeability limited in terms of its absorption, by doing PBPK modeling, you can kind of unpick and understand the mechanisms driving your PK. You can use it to do preclinical modeling, so modeling of data that comes from rats, mice, dogs, and cynos, and use these models and then translate this into first-in-human predictions. We can predict drug-drug interactions. We can predict food effects and pH effects. This is particularly interesting. So in the fed state, our physiology of the GI tract actually changes. Our stomach pH increases, our bile concentration in our duodenum also increases, the transit time of the formulation in the stomach increases, the fluid volumes increase. So what PBPK modeling does is it incorporates all of these physiological changes, and then you can predict how a drug will behave in the fasted state. And this may change with a meal type as well. So these are all things that can be considered. And pH effect, if a patient is taking a protein pump inhibitor, for instance, and even in the fasted state, their stomach pH is slightly higher than it would be without the protein pump inhibitor, we can assess this and figure out, what difference this is going to make to the solubility, permeability, absorption, and ultimately the PK of the compound. We can use PBPK to build in vitro, in vivo correlations. This is primarily done with in vitro dissolution data and correlating this with in vivo dissolution data, and this can help design and help guide formulation development and what to do next with formulation and how to optimize the formulation. Basic one, just predict PK performance. So this can be of a new drug, a different drug in your series if you're earlier on in discovery, or if you're later in the development phase and you've found a drug candidate, this can be predicting the performance of different or alternative formulations. And it can be used to help guide experimental design when we're designing clinical trials. There are multiple softwares out there that you can use for PBPK modeling or this kind of data analysis in general. What I primarily use at Quotient is a software called GastroPlus, which is owned by a company called Simulations Plus. And most of our PBPK work is done through this. There is also a software called PKSim. This is actually open access, so it's free to download for anyone to use. And there's some really great YouTube videos and tutorials that come along with this that teach you how to use it. And we often use this as well. The thing with PKSim is there's a software kind of behind PKSim that you can go in and actually edit some of the equations and the coding behind the software. So if you want to do something a little bit more bespoke, PKSim gives you the ability to kind of customize some of your simulations. Phoenix 1 is another software provided by a company called Satara that we use regularly to do some NCA PK analysis and data cleaning and IVIVC. And we really use RStudio a lot as well for data visualization and data cleaning. And R, again, is an open access software, which there are, again, loads of videos and tutorials out there how to learn R. So if you're kind of interested in a discipline in industry, especially one that's directly linked to doing the science, I would recommend looking at some R tutorials, and it's a really good skill to learn. So in terms of like my career and how I got to where I was, I initially did an undergrad in pharmacology at the University of Glasgow in 2013 to 2017, which is horrific. That sounds a really long time ago. It does feel like yesterday, but that's where I started my journey. I took a year out actually to save up to do my master's. I think, as Emily mentioned earlier, it's incredibly expensive to do a master's. So I took a year out to save up. I took a postgraduate loan out from the government to cover the tuition fees, and use the money that I'd saved in the year between to cover my living costs, which was tight. but I did it in the end. We got there, and that was in drug discovery and pharmaceutical sciences at the University of Nottingham. And then once I graduated, my first job was at a company called Signature Discovery, also based in Nottingham, as a DMPK scientist. So another acronym. DMPK stands for Drug Metabolism and Pharmacokinetics. So my role there, it was a lab-based role, and I would be doing assays to determine a lot of drugs' properties and characteristics. Some of the things I mentioned that we actually plug into the PBK model, so metabolism in hepatocytes and microsomes, how a drug binds to protein plasma proteins, how it binds to brain homogenate, the stability in different matrices or different solvents. A whole host of assays, too many to mention. And in my latter years at Signature, I kind of specialized more in vivo NCA, again, looking at samples taken from preclinical studies, so primarily rats and mice, sometimes dog, very occasionally cyno, and I'd analyze these samples and quantify the amount of drug in these samples to give you a concentration time profile, so you could understand how the drug was behaving in vivo. My current role, I'm an Associate Modelling and Simulations Research Fellow at Quotient, which I discussed in the previous slides. I've been in this current role for 2 years now. So how did I get here? I actually initially applied to study psychology at the University of Glasgow. For those that study in Scotland will be aware of the system, but for those that don't, it's a little bit different in Scotland, where you have 4 years for your undergrad degree. In the first 2 years, you study many different subjects. And then in your final 2 years, you do your honours in one particular subject. I didn't like psychology in my first 2 years. I didn't find it scientific enough. I was more drawn to the neuroscience side of psychology. And one module I had in my second year was called Drugs and Disease, and that was the first time I was ever exposed to pharmacology, and I loved it. So I was fortunate enough to be able to then change my honours and do my degree in pharmacology. I knew quite early on that I wanted to work in industry and in the pharma industry, but it was really unclear to me how I could actually use my degree, or what field I could go into, or even what roles I could apply to. I had absolutely no idea. I know since then the University of Glasgow has actually incorporated a kind of careers aspect to the degree, where the students are able to kind of connect with alumni, and they have various projects kind of based on careers and life after university, which is super important. And I guess things like this didn't exist when I was at university, but which would have been really helpful. But what was clear to me is that all the things I did find was that I needed a postgraduate degree. Things may have changed now. It's been a long time since I graduated from my undergraduate degree, but at the time I couldn't find anything that I could use my just Bachelor of Science. I needed a master's or a PhD. So I chose to go with a master's. This was a taught master's over a PhD, for a few reasons, really. Like, firstly, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work in industry, but I wasn't clear on what parts of industry I wanted to work at. So I was kind of put off by choosing a PhD that was really kind of specific and niche in one particular area. I wanted to keep my learning quite wide at the time. And secondly, it was driven by finances. I just needed a job. I needed to earn some money. I couldn't face another 4 years of being a student. So I chose to just do the masters and then start working. In terms of like how I chose the particular masters I did, I looked at all of the kind of pharmacology related masters that were available at the time. I think there's significantly more now, which is really great. But I think I was just particularly interested in the course content of the masters, and I also made sure that the university had good links with pharma industry, and I was aware of like job opportunities in Nottingham post graduation. So I know for my master's course, they had a link with Signature, which is where I eventually worked, that they'd hired multiple graduates off the course in previous years. So I knew that they had a good relationship there and that there was opportunity for me to get in the door that way. Kind of lessons and things I wish I'd known earlier. It's okay to not know what you want to do. The role I am in now, and even my first role in the lab, I didn't even know existed when I was at university and when I graduated. So it's probably likely that you'll end up doing something now that in the future that you don't even know exists now. And your first job, your entry-level job, doesn't have to be your dream role. It's important to get your foot in the door to gain experience. And I think once you're in and you're inside, you can then see all of the different kind of roles in that department, all of the different departments in that company, all of the different companies and the kind of style of companies and roles that are available to you. But I think until you're in and you're on the inside, it's very hard to get a taste of all the different components. So yeah, it's okay if you don't know what you want to do. I think that's quite common. You don't necessarily need a PhD. I don't feel like I've ever been held back in terms of promotion or salary from not having one. This was something I was really worried about when I was deciding what to do. And I do think in particular industries, this is not the case. So at Signature, there were also chemistry and bioscience departments. And I think in those fields, a PhD is needed and is important if you want to progress. But in DMPK and in clinical pharmacology and in what I'm doing now, I don't think it's essential. I see a lot of people that I work with that are super knowledgeable, that are working at a really high level and don't have a PhD. And I think part of that is there are PhDs available in this field more so now than ever, but also, it's not as common as a chemistry or a bioscience degree. So I think once you're in and if you're good at your job, you can go just as far. I think one thing I will say is that if you're applying for other jobs, you may need more experience than someone with a PhD. So it often says we're looking for someone with a PhD and 3 years of industry experience. And it might say, or, someone with 10 years industry experience, for example. Don't quote me on those exact numbers. So it may mean that for a same job that you may need the extra years. But apart from that, I think it has never held me back in the specific field I've been in. Make sure you truly understand your MSci course content. I say this because my course was very heavily chemistry based, which I had no idea about before starting. Yeah, that was totally by surprise. And I think a lot of the people on the course had done chemistry as their undergrad. I didn't know this. So I think it's really important that if you're interested in an MSci, make sure you attend the open day, speak to the lecturers. Maybe one good thing to ask them is, what is the background of the majority of people that are on this course? As a pharmacology student, what are the aspects of this course that I may struggle with? Yeah, it was fine. It was really hard work, but I managed to do it without having that chemistry background. I didn't even do chemistry at A level, so it was a bit of a shock, but it's doable. I'm glad I did that course now. It got me the job I'm currently in. I never would be here without that course, but had I have known the chemistry component beforehand, I probably wouldn't have applied. So just make sure that you do your research, because I thought I had, and I clearly hadn't. Another thing is think about where you want to live. In pharmaceutical industry, there's often an expectation that you're on site at least a few days a week. I'm quite lucky in my role that I only have to be on site 1 day a week, but I know in big pharma, it is the kind of standard that you're on site at least 3 days a week. Therefore, you need to be situated near where the pharmaceutical companies are. My experience, there's kind of 3 main hubs in the UK for pharmaceutical companies. The first one being down in Oxford, Cambridge and London area, so down south. The next, there's a small hub and lifestyle hub in Nottingham, which is where I'm currently based. And then over in Manchester, Greater Manchester area. That's something I didn't know beforehand. So I think before you kind of take a master's or a PhD or you apply for a job, just make sure you're aware of what other companies are in the area, so that you probably might not want to stay at your entry level job forever. So you need to be sure that there's other companies in the area. Otherwise you will have to relocate. So that's something that you do need to consider. And lastly, in an interview, it is okay not to know an answer. I've been involved in a lot of interview processes recently, and especially for an entry level job, some things you're just not going to know, but what we're looking for as an interviewer is how you respond to not knowing an answer. So don't just say I don't know, but say actually I'm not 100% sure, but this is how I would approach this problem, or could it be about X, Y, and Z? It's more about how you approach it and your problem solving, as opposed to getting everything right. We don't expect everyone to get everything right. It's more about your attitude and your willingness to learn and willingness to try. So that was everything I had in terms of slides. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take questions.
All right, thank you so much. That was so insightful. And again, it's kind of like just echoing what I've been saying. Like, I think you'll go in expecting to hear, a lot, and then you guys just come in and then like tell us about your experience and the roles and things that you do, and it's just even more than what we can kind of like think about. So thank you so much for that as well. So before I pass off to Isosa to just ask the questions, I've got another question. And it's something that you kind of talked about, the idea that like, not having a PhD didn't stop you from getting promotions. But if you take a look at, Danielle's Danielle's LinkedIn, you'll see that in your experience working for Signature, you raised quite a few levels. So obviously you started off as just a DMPK scientist, then you rose up to senior scientist 1, senior scientist 2 in the 4 years that you were there. So my question for you, as someone that obviously was doing this without a PhD, and is that like a typical like progression in terms of career that you expect to see, or are you kind of just like one of the lucky ones that just knew the things to say, what to do, etc., in order to get these promotions? Like, did you do anything special, or would you say that like that type of promotional progression is something that is quite typical, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think largely, my experience, if you work hard in pharma, you are rewarded. Yeah, if you work hard, if you go above and beyond, if you're really good at your job, then you will progress. I don't think I did anything out of the ordinary. I would say being in a contract research organization, you probably have a lot more responsibility earlier on in your career than if you were to work in big pharma, for instance. So I think maybe the opportunities for promotion arose a lot sooner in a company like that. And I think if you joined a startup, it would be similar, that you'd have more responsibility and more opportunity to progress. But yeah, no, I think if you're good at your job, then I don't think it will hold you back. And I think once you've got the job, the kind of playing field is leveled and no one really thinks of you, oh, you don't have a PhD, you have a PhD. I think once you're in the door, then how you turn up to work and how you do your job and the things outside of your job, that's what gets recognized. I know everyone's not that lucky to have that experience, but in the 2 places I've worked so far, that's been my experience, that if you put in the work, it is recognized.
All right, that's quite good. And then my next question is just in case like some people don't know, but are you able to kind of maybe like explain the different seniorities in terms of like what a scientist versus a senior scientist 1 and a senior scientist 2 is, and sort of like what roles those different titles would basically entail?
If I'm completely honest, this is completely different from company to
Oh,
company.
right, okay.
So
Yeah.
I wouldn't put like too much weight on it. Everywhere you go, they have slightly different titles and slightly different meanings. I mean, for me at Signature, initially I was just running the assays. As I got more experience, I was able to train other people. I was able to kind of check people's reports. And the further I progressed, I also had kind of client responsibility, where I was like a project representative on clients and I was interpreting the data. So yeah, but I would say the titles aren't transferable across different companies, even big pharma to big pharma, they're completely different. So
Right.
it's hard to judge. But I think as long as you feel like you're developing and that's all that matters. Or to me, that's all that matters, you know.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. All right, so I'll pass over to Isosa to ask the questions that we had in the Google form as well as chat as well.
Hi, I know everyone's tired of seeing my face popping in and out, but the questions have to be answered. So Natalia has put down that she's looking at working at Signature Discovery, and she's seen so many graduates go work straight into it after doing a postgrad. How did you find transitioning into working in industry with doing a master's instead of an MRes?
Yeah, I mean, I think I found it fine. I think my master's taught a lot of the theory behind what I did at Signature. I obviously had lab work in my undergrad degree. So yeah, I guess in terms of the lab work, I maybe didn't have as much experience if I'd have done a research project. I did have a small research project as part of my taught masters as well, which I was in the lab for a couple of months, obviously not as long as I would have been with a research masters. So yeah, I found the transition okay, actually. I think at an entry level, they're not expecting you to know everything. They probably have different processes and different techniques and different SOPs that they want you to follow. So you are normally trained from kind of the ground up. So at an entry level, it doesn't matter too much if you don't have all of the experiences, as long as you're willing to learn and give it a go and follow the processes, then I think you should be fine.
And Ade says, how much of a background in computer science would you say is needed to excel in your role, especially with PBK?
This is a really good question. So I'd say PBK is like a really multidisciplinary field. I think you know, in my particular company, we have people that are mathematicians, we have people that are engineers, but we also have people with pharmacology background. And I think to have a good PBK team, you need people from all aspects, and we work collaboratively together. I think in terms of someone that doesn't have a lot of computer science or coding, like I have learned a little bit through kind of data visualization in R, but a lot of what I do is more about the interpretation of what comes out of the software. So the software is already coded for you, but you need the biology and the pharmacology to understand the outputs and interpret that. And I think they are two different skill sets. To be able to build the software and build the equations is kind of one skill set, and then the scientists that can use it and interpret it and then use that to help clients, that is also a kind of a different skill set. But it's really important in any team to have a mixture of both. So I'd say don't be put off if your maths isn't really strong, or like you don't have a background of coding. Like these things you can pick up as you go. But a good PBK team needs a mixture of all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of people.
Thank you. And lastly, for maybe people who are in first year or second year, and maybe they're considering a position in PBPK, what sort of opportunities do you think that they should reach out for, or they should try to maybe strengthen their career progression to get to that point, or just little gems that they can maybe put in their CVs, I guess?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And actually, I knew I wanted to get into modeling for a long time before I actually did. And it was actually really, really hard to get in because I don't know, there aren't really entry level positions. So I think this is something that definitely needs work, and something that, you know, in my career in the future, I'd like to change that. And one thing that people can do is that all the best resources are actually the software providers themselves. So our main software that you use is provided by Simulations Plus. They have a lot of videos and a lot of tutorials about PBPK and the software, which are available to use. The thing with Simulations Plus is it's quite expensive, the software, the licensing, but I do think they offer like a university access, which is free. I don't know all the details about that, so if you are interested, I would contact them. There's other software, so Satara's SimSip is another software. I can provide all the links. Again, I think it's expensive, but they offer a university package. And again, there's lots of links and webinars and videos, even if you're not accessing the software, even just learning about the field. And then there's that PK Sim, which is operated through I think they're called Open Systems Pharmacology, and that's a free platform. So if you are interested in PBPK, you could download that for free, and there's loads of videos and tutorials online. So yeah, my recommendation would be just to kind of, the best sources actually are the software providers, to look at their websites and access any training material or courses that they have, and that's a good place to start. And in terms of, there is one master's in the UK, actually at the University of Manchester. I think it's called like model-based drug discovery or development or something. If you search PBBK masters, it's the only one that will come up. I didn't know about it at the time. To be fair, I didn't even know I was interested in modelling when I was looking for a master's. But if this is a field that you want to pursue, I think that was probably the master's that you should look at and has the kind of best connections.
Thank you so much. It was so interesting to hear your journey.
All right, thank you so much to just everybody for sticking through. We've overran by a little bit, but it was worth it to kind of just like hear all of that insight and get all of that information. So obviously we just want to thank all of the panelists for freeing up their time. It's been a long week. I'm sure all of them are waiting to go back to the weekend to kind of like unwind a little bit. So obviously for them to come here and just dedicate their time completely free of charge, voluntary, it's honestly just such a blessing. And especially as you've heard a few of them say that like they've not had something like this. So it's quite good that they were able to sort of like look back and say, you know what, I didn't have this. This is something that I want to be a part of, sort of like helping the next generation of scientists. So I'll put their faces up just in case. I guess I have short-term memory. So we have Sarah, who spoke to us in the beginning, Emily, Qasim, and then Dannielle, who finished us off as well. I will also, I've got everyone's email, so I will include their LinkedIn in the emails as well. So if you have any questions, I'm sure they won't mind being able to answer some of them. But yeah, so as I said, this was the first ever webinar. This is something that we're trying to do every so often, just to show us essentially the different roles that we can go into. Because obviously coming into this, I had an idea of certain roles and what the certain activities that the speakers were doing. But then as they kind of like spoke and said about all of these other things, I started to realize that even what I thought they did was very minuscule compared to what they actually do. So obviously thank you for that as well. And just really quickly, I wanted to give out a shout out. So I'm sure a lot of you guys know my face because it's plastered everywhere. But these are the faces behind the Student Pharmacologist Network who made all of this possible. So we have Abby, Abisha, Isosa, Kalin, Karim, Maria, Precious, Sophia, Tasneem, and Yashvi. And they all work in the social media team, getting the posts out, in the opportunities and outreach. So actually contacting today's speakers and essentially just like getting them on board with this, as well as a secretary team, so managing the forms that we've done and the communications as well. So I just say that like as much as we want to thank the speakers, we also want to thank the team that have helped here. Mostly importantly, just to Isosa as well, who's been today's there's a word for it, and it really just escaped my mind, who's been today's chair, so facilitating the question and answer section as well. So thank you so much to them. But yeah, as I said, this is the first of many webinars that we're trying to do as a Student Pharmacologist Network. So hopefully you guys have seen some value in that. We'll be releasing the certificates of completion, and we also have a short Google questionnaire just on your experience and just like basically to get your feedback. So if you could just take some time to fill that out when you get that email, that would be greatly appreciated. But I'm not sure, I think Qasim is still here. So Qasim, Dannielle, did you guys have any like last closing remarks that you kind of wanted to say, any like last piece of advice before we head out?
Nothing in particular, just that if anyone has any questions, like feel free to reach out. I think that is like a really good way of making connections and finding out where the opportunities are, and just good luck with the rest of all your studies.
Oh, thank you so much. So hopefully everyone can have a nice night and has a lovely weekend as well. All right, so thank you guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
All right, bye.